Okay, I've got some, got some sound here, so we'll go ahead and get started now. We are in that part of the course where we're going to be working with databases, and again, just to keep us on track, last week, Thursday night, the first, we went ahead and, of course, we had already covered these, the last Excel cases. We've been working ahead on those. And then that also the Excel 12 and 13, those cases are finished. So now, as I said, we have been working ahead, and now we're going to start to look at access. Now, let me say this. If you have a Mac, you're not going to be able to use access. So you're going to have to come over to the lab or the lab at the library to be able to handle access files. I'm just going to have to repeat this to you probably 3 or 4 times before everyone understands it. So the case uploads or the casework that you need to do, you're going to have to be on a PC because Mac doesn't handle this. Now, we took a look Thursday and we talked some about databases. I covered some important concepts, for example, like the idea of the data cube. Okay, we talked about that. We talked about why we utilize databases. And we started off by looking at the concept of a data warehouse. And that data warehouse is just simply a process whereby we store data in tables. Okay, and then we use queries to pull data from those tables. And sometimes you can even string the tables together. Now, we're going to work on just some fairly simple cases here, the access 1 through 4. I think there's 6 cases. Nothing terribly elaborate. And in each case, as I've done with the Excel cases, I'm going to provide you an old example so you can see. And then we'll work with one out of the textbook. So just want to make sure, having mentioned the textbook, and I'm just going to click the login. That's at Northwind database. This is over this file. This database is over there in the files section of Canvas. Diminish that down. And again, want to make sure that you use these files. We're going to use the access. I have the instructions for you in terms of the files that we're going to be using. Okay, and I covered a lot of that in part 1. And at the end of part 1, we had some kind of a malfunction. I'm not sure what's causing that to pop up, but I'm going to have to take a look at it and see. For some reason, it appears that someone is, or maybe folks inadvertently are trying to project a video screen. And this time when they did it, created a problem and pretty much cut off the last 15 or 20 minutes of class. So that's, I'm not sure how to tell you that. But when you come in, as you'll note, I have the video. I don't have any videos. I don't use those because it takes up bandwidth, and I think it's distracting. So, nonetheless, we talked about the database concept, a warehouse concept, where it's a collection of databases. We talked about queries. We talked about forms. And we talked about, for example, this little form right here, which is a dashboard. We talked about that, where I can go and take a look at key kinds of information that are important to me. And we talked about the fact that we use databases to store and to extract data. All right. And we looked at this Northwind as a primary example. Now, I'm going to close it off. Again, the Northwind database is over there in the files section of Canvas. And we're going to work on access case number 1. Now you say, where will I find that? Well, as you recall, in each module, I have a file, okay, that will tell us the resources for different cases. And here is the file. I'll just fire it up. And what we're going to do is look at modify a sales support system, okay, and talk about creating tables. And here's Northampton Abrasives. That's case ACCDB1, and that's in the files section of Canvas. And then this is the file from the companion. This is part of the Access companion files that are with the Lambert and Cox text. So now we're moving over the text that focuses on Access. And let me see here. The files for the Access companion files, those are also in the files section of those are in the files section of Canvas. And I'll open this up. All right, and this is the companion content. And we're going to be working with, as I mentioned, the Garden 01, and that we'll see that over in the textbook, Lambert and Cox textbook. They cover that pages 28 to 43 and 74 to 89. Now, as I'd said before, if you care to, you can take the Lambert and Cox text like we did with the Excel text and find the relevant text passage and go step by step by step. If you wish, I will walk you through the example I have, and then we'll look at this textbook case, and I will probably skip some steps just simply for the sake of time. Okay, and just as you start to become familiar with this, you'll be more comfortable navigating around. If you want to get more comfortable at navigating through an Access database file, you can start to use the Northwind Traders and look at it. You're not going to break it, okay? And that'll give you a better feel of how it's all put together. Once you start to see or get the feeling of how Access looks, and that is, it has a toolbar across the top, and then the objects that you're going to use are down the left. That's very, very much consistent with what you'll see in any commercial product you'll use when you go to work. Okay. As I've mentioned before, Access and Excel are kind of like teaching you how to drive. And then once you know how to drive a car, it doesn't matter what type of car you've got. You know how to drive a car. All right. So we're going to look at ACCDB1, okay, and that's in the Files section of Canvas. And the Garden, it's in this companion text, and we'll find Garden Company 1, okay? And so you're going to want to put it on your desktop. So I'm going to copy and then paste it. And there's Garden Company 1, all right? Okay, we've got Northwind Traders, which is our big example we're going to be playing around with. Then we have the Garden Company, and then we want to work with Access case number 1, Northampton Abrasives. And so I'm going to go back here, all right, and I'm going to go into the Files section. And we'll find ACCDB1. There it is. This is the Northampton's case. And this is an old case, but I wanted to show you these. So when I go through an old case, I'm making them parallel or similar to where we're at in the Lambert and Cox textbook. So we're going to download this file. You'll want to, of course, put it on your desktop. And so what I always do is I show it in the folder, right? Then I diminish, and then I just put it on the desktop, and then on my desktop, because remember, you're going to have to save this to your desktop, and so it's in a different environment. Then upload it, because if you don't do that, a Canvas will consider it a security risk, because otherwise you're dealing with only a temporary file. I mentioned I'll close this off. I had mentioned the textbook for the course. We're now at that part where we're working on access. And let me go to my vital source library. Okay. And this is the book we're working with. Access step by step. This is the Lambert and Cox text. All right. And we'll click the table of contents. And we're going to look here at chapter 1. Okay. And this is just exploring Microsoft Access. We'll go to that. Now, we are going to be starting with the garden case number 1. And so let's open it up just a moment. That file, it says Garden Company 01. All right. And we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to enable the content, click that, and then you're going to save it as, and it's going to ask you to save it, and you will want to save it on your desktop, Garden Company 01. And it gives you this business about it's a read only. I'm going to put my name there, last name. And I'll save it as such. Okay, now we're able to upload the content. Now, let's take a look at this for just a minute. We'll go back up to the textbook. All right. And here they show us the parts of an Access database. Now, all databases have 4 objects or things, if you will. They have a table, which is where I store data. They have a way to query, that is to extract data out of the tables. They have a report function, which is a way for me to report or to display data. For example, you remember in Excel, you've learned that what's in the cell in a spreadsheet, okay, may not be the same. It might be the result of an equation, but then when you look up in the formula bar, you'll see the equation. Okay, it's the same way with a database. It has tools to display the results, and those are typically called reports. Although you can use a data set when you run a query, or what we call a view. So you've got a couple of ways to look at the results of your work. Now, the 4th and final object that's part of the database is what we call a form. And a form is what we use to input data to the table. And Thursday night, as we went over to Amazon, for example, we looked at a recommendation engine, which is a form of a database. But what I showed you is it's a form where you click on a picture and you look at some information about a product. And when you're doing that, there are 2 things happening. If you're going to make a purchase, then the data that you click on, when you finally put your items in the shopping cart, then it goes to a different form, which is part of their e-commerce store. Otherwise, if you're just browsing, Amazon's collecting the data about where you browse, how long you browse, etc., so they can begin to build a profile of you. Okay, so they can recommend things, saying, well, if you like this, you also might like this. Okay. So again, and then we talked about databases, say, for example, like Spotify, where if you don't have the premium version, you choose a song, and then they begin to feed you songs, and you have to listen to so many uh, based on what they think you're going to like. And the reason I have the premium is I know what I like. I want to just get the music, okay. But if you want to do the free version, you can go along and have them force feed music to you, some of which you like, what you want, okay. And that's a way. Even on the premium version, and you build playlists and you choose what you want to listen to, they too have incorporate a recommendation engine, because they'll show you like the new songs of that week or something like that. I don't go on it that much anymore. I tend to use YouTube, okay, and that's just me because I can see videos and stuff. But again, it's each his own. But I wanted to show you that so you understood. We're extracting data. We're getting people, and typically people like Facebook or Twitter, you're the product, okay, and you are really filling out a form that goes into their table. Well, here's this garden. This is the garden one, and the authors want to have us start up by looking at tables. So I'm gonna. And as I mentioned, I was going to have us start at page 23, okay? And there's the table. There's a form, okay? They show you that. And then a query. These are the 4 types. And then the report, okay? Now, databases also have things called macros. And a macro, as we learned when we worked with Access, is nothing more than a way that we can copy our keystrokes and then execute those keystrokes, then save them, and then we can create an object. Remember, we create like a square, circle, whatever, and then we assign the macro to that picture or object, and the query will execute. Remember, we did that. We did the inventory. So the text does a pretty good job here of showing us these 4 different types. And as we walk through these cases, understand that you have a data admin course where we'll go a little bit deeper into it, and you'll see more and more practical business uses for a database. Now, if you were to ask the average business person about spreadsheets, they would tell you they're incredibly fantastic things. If you ask them about a database, they're just not quite certain. And that's because databases are just now really starting to come into their own. And they're just now starting to become more like an application that you would use, like a spreadsheet. Now, your phone, for example, is really nothing more than a physical device that houses databases. An app is really nothing more than a database. It mimics somewhat a macro, because you press on the button or whatever the icon is in your phone and stuff happens, okay? Well, this is some company, and they're in the gardening business, and so we're gonna we'll see these 4, and again, okay, they've got some of the features of Access 213, 210, 216, and there's not too much difference between those 3 products. There's a little bit, but again, there's not enough difference in them to really be that concerned about. And when you go to work, you probably won't be working with Access. You'll be out there maybe working with SAS or Oracle. or any one of the number of commercial products that are available for you to use. So, um, I, as I said before, we're we're focusing on teaching you how to drive. And when you get out and use those products like SAS Visual Analytics or Oracle or any one of the number of so-called dashboard products, you're going to find that same pattern. Some of them will have you'll have a toolbar. You'll have a toolbar at the top, and then some places on the left-hand side to collect or to set some queries or searches or tables. And then on the right-hand side, you could do some qualifiers. Excel PowerPoint is my PowerPoint. Excel pivot table, is very much like that. And as I mentioned before, if you really want to see where things are headed, Excel pivot table tries to give the best of both worlds: the ability to store and extract a lot of data, and the ability to take that data, all right, and to convert it into something that's useful for your business. Now, I want to talk about something called a record. And you say, what's a record? So we're going to open up the garden right here, this garden company, all right? And I'm going to have to go through this business again. Yep, I forgot. I just opened the wrong file. Let me close this off and get the one that I saved to the desktop earlier, because that's not the one I want. I want Garden Company, Keith Harmon. And here we go. Here's the one I'd said. So we're good to go. All right, now I'm going to open up a table. All right, this is called customers. Now there are three different types of tables, okay? One of them is what we call a dimension table. And a dimension table is really nothing more than a table that consists of key variables or key names that we constantly use. Now, here, for example, is the categories. And so this shows us the types of plants that they cover and the category name, and then a description. Okay, so this is where I keep things like names. All right, it's a dimension. The category of plant is a variable or a type. Now, I'm going to open up the customers table, and here is another what we call a dimension table. A dimension is an important category or group that is part of every record, okay? A record is really nothing more than a collection of the information in all of the columns in tables that I use, typically dimension tables. And here's the dimension of customers, and we have all this information we get from them, their ID, their first name, last name. You can see all that, okay? So far I've looked at the products that I have, all right? And then I've looked at the customers that I have. Now there's another object. There's another what we call a dimension table, and it's the employees. Here's the employees' numbers, their names, etc. All right. Then we have what we call a fact table. So what's that? Well, a fact table is what it is. It's a list of facts. Typically, it's a list of transactions. Okay? Now, when we use a database, we try to make some kind of link between who, what, when, and where, okay, and the transactions that we record in the database. Okay? It's that simple. And here I have the order ID, the product, the price. So this is these are what if you've used drop down menus when you're filling out a form, for example. Those drop down menus really represent the data that are in tables, and you just invoke that whatever table so you can make a choice. So like a table, like you're filling out a form and asks you what state you live in. Okay. Now here's another fact table, and these are orders. And we call it a fact because these are transactions. These are order IDs and all of the details about them. Okay, so we have details about the order. We have the orders table itself. Okay, here's another dimension table called products. Okay. And then we have another dimension table called shippers. And then we have another dimensional table called suppliers. Now, I'm not walking you through step by step like the textbook is. I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to challenge you, the Lambert and Cox textbook, to read the textbook, look at those figures, okay? And that plus what you hear from me in these lectures, and you'll start to get an understanding. Now, I already have told you, what files you're going to need. And to get the workshop credit, obviously, I want you to upload something. You could always upload, for example, Northampton abrasives, which we're going to look at here in just a minute, okay? Or you could upload this one. Okay, and these are workshops. That's what they're designed to do, to show you how to do particular things. Now, as many of you have learned, when I do this, you can bet your bottom dollar that at some point in an exam or maybe even the finals, I'm going to ask you to use some of the skills that I demonstrate to you in the workshops. It would be nonsense for me to do otherwise. And it would be silly, not really smart, if you don't pay attention, okay? So I don't expect you to keep notes and all of that, but you do need to understand that if you come to my office during an exam and you say, I don't get this, I'm probably going to tell you, well, you remember we did this in class, and I recorded that lab. So the labs are designed to give you some practical skills. And so we're here if you want to have a screencast and log in and listen to music or watch TV or whatever. If you're smart, you're going to watch it 1 or 2 times, maybe 3, and you'll download the transcript that comes with transcripts so that you have a good understanding of what we did in class. All right. So now we have a suppliers table. This is another what we call a dimension table. And then, as I showed you earlier, we had an orders table. That's a fact table. Okay. Now the orders details table is a little bit different critter, and it's a dimension table. However, I guess it's more of like a summary. It's one of those kind of hybrid tables that are out there, and it's typically more like this table is kind of a summary. In my mind, I guess it's a fact table, but what we would traditionally call the fact table would be transactions, and that would be the orders. Okay. Well, let's go back up here for a moment to the categories, and we're going to learn a little bit about how we're going to take a peek under the hood and see what the table is made of. So we're going back to the categories table and open it up. And you'll notice here on the far left-hand side, it says view. All right. Recall that in Excel, the cells out in the spreadsheet will show you the result, the formula bar, will show you the math or the cell selection that creates the output in that cell. All right. We have, in the same way, we have views when we work in a database. Up here, we're at what we call the data sheet level. Okay. But we can kind of go under the hood on this and look at a thing called the design. Click that there. All right. And let's look at this for a minute. The design view tells me the field that I have, okay, and then what type of data I have in that field, and then a description. Now, while it says on here the description is optional, if you don't describe, when a table is created by a database administrator, or if an employee has the power to create a table, you better make sure that you know what the field, you better be sure of all of this. And most importantly, in the description, you need to say what this is about. And you would be also good to have a log of this. This is a number automatically assigned to a new category. This was done by Keith Harmon on November the 8th, 2018. Why? Because you may drop dead, get hit by a car. If you're working with it and you've created this table, but you need to know who did this and what it's supposed to represent. Okay, you can't trust that people will look at this and just go, "Oh, I know what that means." And here we have a category name, and that's data type is short text, and then the description is a long text. Now, the data type is important, and this is when the students over in computer science, they take a course called data structures. And in that course, what they learn is the best way to collect data about a certain type of dimension, and how and which data are the best way to express that dimension and or to store them in the most economical and effective way. And so they really climb into this issue of data types. Okay. Now, we have category name. And if you look down here, and I'm going to click on the field name for category, you're going to see it has a thing called the field properties. And this tells you, okay, I'm using the data type, and then the field size, any new values, the format, a caption. We have the caption here, and it's called category ID. If I wanted to, I could put something else in there as a caption. So if I want to hide the real name of my table, I could do so as a security measure. And then finally, the text alignment. Now, there's another little tab here called lookup. Okay, lookup tab. And the lookup tab here is one that if I activate, I can look up and run a query from other tables to populate this table. Okay. And I'm going to come here to description. Okay. Now, let's move over here to the, let's say this for a minute, the long text. You remember I not mentioned the drop-down menu? Take a look, here's one. Okay. And then we can use the lookup wizard to pull descriptions. Now let's just do that for a moment so we get going on here. Oh, it's got that. Those are all set, so we can't. Those are already done for us. All right. So if we've already got those fixed. So let's come down here to the queries, okay? My apologies. I forgot that those are going to be already fixed, so there's really nothing we're going to be doing about that. And let's look at the customer orders. okay? And this is a fact table. Let's open it up. It's a query. The query is when I extract data from my tables, all right? And as you can see up here, can I take this for just a second? Okay. We've got the who, what, when, where, and why on this record, okay? And this is data from several tables. Now I'm going to turn this annotator off. Well, I need to go back so I can erase that. I'll find my eraser. It's off. Now we're good. And we're going to go down, and just like we have with tables, we have different views of a query. And if I want to, this is the customer orders. I can either right click or I can go up here in the far left hand corner. Now, I tend to right click it, and we're going to click the design view. And we're going to see how this query is put together. You're going to see some things in here, and I'm going to take these and adjust them a little bit. Okay. I'm going to try to elevate, get them a little bit larger. And they're not going to let me do it. It's not cooperating with me. Okay. Now, this is what we call the graphic user interface. Okay. That means what it says. We use graphics for the end user because people find it much easier to manipulate visual objects than to try to write code. And I'm going to show you in just a minute. This is a pretty simple query. Here are the two tables that we're using the customers table, okay, and we're using the orders table. Now, each of those tables have what we call a primary key. You say, what is that? A primary key is a number or something like that I assign to every record so that every record I have is unique. I typically don't want duplicate records. Now, we'll talk about this some, but if you run a report at work one day and you see it's full of a bunch of empty stuff, those are what we call null data. And null data are problematic because we don't know if it was left blank on purpose. So null is different than zero. Zero is a number, which means nothing. It's zero. But a null is just blank space. We don't know if somebody forgot to put the data in. We don't know if we've decided not to collect it. And if we have, why don't we just get rid of that category? It's what we call the problem of nulls. And if you get a report at work one day and it's full of all these blank spaces, you probably need to go see your database administrator and say, I'm not understanding why I'm seeing all this. Why I'm seeing all these empty spaces. And it's pretty inefficient to do that. When when you're working at maybe 100,000 pieces of data, the cost of having something like that's not that big of a deal. But when you start to get 1 million or 2 million or 10 or 20 million records, and you have all of those null data, they start to distort what you're going to get from the query. And also that you've got blank storage sitting there that you're paying for. Okay? There's no reason to have it. Okay. Now, you can see we've got the line between these two, and I'm going to click on that little line. Okay. And I'm going to look at and it's showing us the relationship, and it has, you'll click on it, it's going to say join property, join properties. The great strength of a database, what makes it such a fantastic tool, is that I can take one or more tables of data, fact tables, okay, and I can connect all of them together, and then I can pull all that data. That's how Amazon or Facebook or Walmart or any one of these major companies can build a profile of you. They can string thousands of tables together and pull all that data out. And let me kind of give you a simple challenge for the week. Go online somewhere, go to Amazon and look for some music, all right? Or look for a book. I'll guarantee you that within 24 hours, if you have your own machine, or you do it on a phone, that within 24 hours, when you open up your browser, you're going to start to see ads for that product or similar products. Okay? That's why everybody's so concerned about this thing called big data and the ability to track people, particularly off of a Facebook. For the good part of it is that with those profiles, when you go to Google, and of course, folks feed that data back to Google, you can go search for stuff and find it. The bad news is that your searches, the places you visit, etc., get recorded one way or the other, and so that's a privacy and it's an ethical question that everybody's going to have to face. And that's why, like, Facebook got called into Congress and chewed out because they had sold some data to a firm that had all this information on, I think, 100 million people or something like this, and they targeted ads at people during the election. Now, everybody made a big deal of this because the Trump campaign did it, and there were Russians, it wasn't Trump, it was the Russians, and the claim that the Russians were interfering in our election, which we know they were. But I can tell you, just to be fair, back in 2012, when President Obama ran for re-election, he had a team of people who did the exact same thing. They targeted people who they had a good idea of thinking they're going to vote for us, and they used that profile to send those people emails, to put up banner ads, phone banks, etc., to encourage the people to vote. Okay. So in the past 10 years, we've had two elections, and I'm sure that the election on the 6th, the same kind of thing has been going on. And we get that. Well, we have these joint properties, and we've got two tables: the customer table, which is called the parent. It's the one on the left. The child is what we call is the orders table. Okay. And notice that we've got a dimension table, that is customers, linked up to a fact table. Okay. And we're going to do what we call an inner join, and that's number one, where we only include the rows where the join fields from both tables are equal. This would be an intersection if we were talking about Boolean algebra or Boolean logic. Now, there's a thing called the left join, where I get everything from customers and only those items that match up with orders. Then there's a right-hand join called a right join, where I'd have everything from the orders table and only those other, and then anything that matches between the two tables. Okay, so I'll just show you real quickly what we're talking about. I'll annotate it for you. Okay, I'm going to try. Anyway, let's get our trusty drawer. Okay, here's set A. Okay, and here's set B. You say, oh my goodness gracious, this sounds a lot like math or geometry or logic back from school. You're right. Now I'm going to get my trusty drawer and grab this. Here's A. Here's B. All right. Now, and I'm going to get myself the intersection. I'll just stick with what I got. The intersection of these two is right here. This is what we would call an inner join. A left outer join would be, notice everything in this set plus what matches with this set here. The left we typically call the parent, the right we typically call the child, okay? And typically the parent table is a dimension table and a fact table is the child table. And then we have a right join where we have everything here and what's matched up in here. Now, it's beyond this point of the course, or probably even beyond this course, where we really talk about strategizing our searches. Do I want a right-hand join? Do I want a left-hand join? Or do I want just a strict intersection? And about 95% of the queries or searches you'll ever do at work are going to be just a simple intersection. Let me grab my trusty eraser. There's that. Review. And it's not wanting to cooperate with me. Here we go, finally. And I'm going to just do the cool thing with my mouse here and spotlight it. See? It's like a little alien, doesn't it? And it's a bit annoying as far as I'm concerned, so I'm going to turn that off. All righty. Now, let's look at this. Now, we've seen the join, these two tables. And if I wanted to add another table, I could click Show Table, and then I could just simply add in a third table if they're all linked. But we've just got a simple query here. And notice, first of all, I have check marks. If I want to suppress one column of the results, I can do so by just unchecking that. But here's what we've got down here. We've got the field name, the last name, the city, the region. These are fields. And then, well, what table did you get them from? And it shows the table. And notice that we've got all this data here about the customers. That's the fact table. And then we get the orders. That's from the order date table. And then the shipped date, which is another fact table. And the required date, which is probably a dimension table. We didn't look at every single one of them. All right. Now, if we look up in the top here, we can click on the tab, and we're going to go down to what we call the SQL view. This is the code. And you go, oh my goodness, this looks like gibberish. Well, it's really not. It's a lot simpler than it looks. And if we have a data admin course and I teach it or someone else does, at some point you'll see this, or your employer at some point might say, I'd like you to kind of get familiar with the code a little bit. That's unlikely, but this is what we call Access SQL or SQL, and it's pretty simple in terms of what it's telling you to do. And I'm not going to go through it for time's sake, and also because we don't need to know, but I want you to see the code. And if you want, some of you could take this, or any of you, and you could copy this onto a notepad or onto a notepad, and then you could start to see how this select query, okay, works. You say, well, how do you know it's a select query? Well, amazingly, I can look right here and it says select, but also Access, like most database tools, will give you a visual cue, and here it says select, okay? So I'm selecting it. Now we're going to go back up to the design view where we were, and now we're ready to run the query. Now, look, if I want to, I can click on the data sheet view, the data sheet that view, and I don't actually execute the query. I'm just kind of taking a peek to see what it looks like. But we're going to run, and of course, we're going to run force run. So I'll click run, and there it is. There's my result set. Okay. And I've got those by postal code, by order date, and the required, the order date, the date it was shipped, and a required date. Now let's talk about this real quickly. Here's I ordered on the 12th of December, 12th of January, yikes. Then it's shipped on the 13th. Now, the customer did not indicate to me when they had to have it. So because they didn't see, I have what we call the null problem. I don't know if somebody forgot to put this information in. I don't know if there's an error or something as this was being loaded up. I don't know. If I don't have a required date, all right, then I should have something that would indicate on the required date something that tells us that I don't. It's just a null that I don't have. They didn't ask us for one. Okay, and you could do that in the code. All right, or if you understood that it was left blank, then you would be in a position to say, all right, I get it. But some of this also goes back to a culprit in the customers in the required date. And that's, not good. But we have what we have. All right. This is pretty typical. And again, you have to assume, you can only assume that the customer did not require a date. All right. So we've run our first query. All right. We can close that off. In fact, let's close these all off. And I'll go back to the tables for a minute because I've got shippers, orders, order details. Let's click on the order details and go to the design view for a minute. Okay, products, quantity, and see we have a order ID and a product ID because we matched the two of them up. Let's look at the orders table. Now, here's the culprit that was lurking over there in that query. If I click on the order date, okay, if I come down here and I look in the field properties, I'm going to see that it's not required. All right. Since that's not required, I could just not put data in there, which is pretty stupid. Because I don't know if it was left blank, but I would probably at this point go to my deep database administrator or whoever's doing this and say, hey, I'm getting, what do these blanks mean? And if they say, well, we've just left it blank, that's not good news for you because you don't know if someone just simply didn't put in the data. This is the problem of null data, and it's the biggest problem of any database. That's why I'm spending the time talking about it. If you're going to collect data from people, collect it. Get what you need. Don't just collect data to collect it. When you do, you end up with a lot of junk. And that query we just ran is full of junk because it's full of a blank order dates. Okay. So we don't know if it's required. Now let's click up here on the view on this table, go to the data sheet view, and here we are. And again, we don't know. So if it was required, the required date, this is a required date meaning per the customer. But if it was required to have something inputted, we need to put something that indicates that this is they didn't ask for a special date. Otherwise, okay, I'm in the position when I look at the order details, okay, I'll go back up to the data sheet on it to know, well, pardon me, let's go to back to that query. I'm in a position to know, did I get it to them on time? If someone orders something from me, or I'll say you order something online, for example, and it doesn't get there when you expect it, when they tell you it would be there, or expect it to be there, that's it's annoying if it's some books or whatever you order. If you're in business and you depend upon somebody to ship something to you, and they promise it to you, and it doesn't arrive, you're in trouble. You're probably in trouble with your customer, whom you promised to have everything done for them. Okay? So we've climbed around that query a little bit, and we have some others on delete discontinued products, etc. Okay? And then we have a different type of query, and let's go to the design view on it, and this is what we call an update query. All right. Now notice that we're going to update a couple of things. One of them, and the text will walk you through the scenario, walk you through what you're doing, but I'm okay. I can show you because I've done this enough that I kind of understand what's going on here. If you understand it by looking at it, you can teach the class for me next week. Here we have the field, the unit price, okay, it's from the products table. I have the category name, and that's from the categories table. And I'm going to update the unit price by 10%. You say, how do you know that? Well, if I look here in the update to, I see unit price, and it's embedded in brackets times 1.1. And then I have a criteria, and it says only increase it if it's bulbs or cacti. If it's either one of those, increase the price by 10%. That's all that's going on here. All right. No big deal. But you'll notice if you look up in the top here, you're going to see the update icon is hot. It's showing us, hey, you're doing an update. And I say, okay, I'm going to run it. And I'll say, you're update 11 rows. And I'll say, okay. And I've done it. All right. Now, I'm going to close this off. Well, before we do, I want to go down to the forms. So let's close off this query. And let's come down to the forms, and we'll click on the form that we use for, we have a products, and we have a categories form and a customer form. Let's open that up. Now we want to keep track of who our customers are, so we'll use a form, okay? And that form is literally what it is. It's how I input data. Now, if I want to, I can create different types of forms, okay? And I could go to the design view on this thing. All right. And I could choose some different types of forms if I care to. All right. And I can click format. We can rearrange things. We can redesign it. And we'll look at this a little bit later on. No big deal here. All right. So I'll go back up to the form view. And I could create, and I'm going to do form design. Pardon me. I don't want to do the form design. I'll go back here, create. And I'm going to click on the form wizard. And it will tell me what fields do I want for my form, where will I get the data, etc. So I'm going to cancel that. And this form one, I'm going to close it. Now I've got the garden company. Now I'm going to click create, and then I'm going to come over here where it says more forms, and I'm going to click on split form. So what is that? The split form lets me input data. A form, again, is used to populate my table. Someone calls in, they place an order, I open up the form, I get their customer ID, all this stuff. And then this shows me the table where the data are being inputted. Okay? I like that one the best because it will show me as I add in, as I use the form. Now, if you call into a call center, someone probably has something like this in front of them, and they'll say, "What's your customer? Did you get on this?" Say you get you buy pizza online, and maybe they make you register and all this stuff, and then you have a customer ID that pulls you up, and they know who you are, where you're at, all that stuff. Okay, pretty simple. Not a big deal. You say you're making this seem also. And the truth is, it really is that simple. You can waste a lot of time trying to overthink this. Now, the truth is that for most of you, and you're either going to be looking at this view of a form, and if you notice over here, there's some different views of forms. And on a query, you're going to be looking at the graphic user interface, like orders by date, and we'll open it up. And then, okay, well, let's get her out of that product analysis query. And we're going to be working at the graphic user interface. Okay, where we choose the table or tables if they're linked. And then we make selections of the particular field. Now you say, all right, you talk about linking tables and all that. All right, what's that all about? It's pretty simple, okay? Again, there's no need to get all freaked out about it because it's with this graphic user interface, it's simple stuff. You say, okay, talk to me. I'll show you. I'm going to click on Database Tools, and I'm going to click on Relationships. And this will show you how these tables are related to each other, how they are linked, and how they are linked starts to tell us how the data or the information flows through the company. Now you're going to notice, and I'll move this down so this is up here. I'll try to get it to have some semblance of order, okay? Notice something. You see these 1 to the infinity marks. That means one to many. We have an order ID. Can we have more than one? Of course. Every transaction order should have its own unique ID. And so we have a one-to-many relationship. Here, look at the orders table and the employees. We have one employee and several account representatives. And so we have different employees assigned to different accounts, and we're good to go. That's called a one-to-many relationship. Now, we could take this orders table and we're going to scoot it down a little bit, and I'll take the employees and put up. And it starts to make a little bit more sense. Okay. Then we have the products table. And the primary key is a key that is a field in our table that we designate that makes every record unique. Now, the smartest way to do it is to just simply use what we call just a simple automated number, or what we call a surrogate key that will just, it's a field, and every time you create a new entry, you get a new key, which makes every entry unique. Okay. And you can see from shippers, etc. So that's one of those. All right, we'll close that off. There's another tool that helps us. All right, and I'm going to close everything off. Okay, and I'm going to click on the form categories. All right, I'm going to click on the database tools, and I'm going to click on object dependencies. Now, this says, all right, I have the categories form. Are there any objects that depend on me? Okay, and none. Are there objects that I depend upon? And you'll see that the categories table depends upon the categories form, is dependent upon the categories in the products. They feed the information to the categories so we can see the flow of information. All right. Let's close this off, and we won't make any sense. Won't make any deal with it. And let's go back to ACCDB1. And by the way, this is the one that you'll upload for your credit for the workshop. And let's look at it real quickly. Here we have some tables, and then I have the table populated, order patterns, and product groups. Now, in this query, you see Kansas City clients. I'm going to open it in the design view, and you're going to see what's going on. We've decided that we want to get the following information: the company, the first name, the last name, and the title. These are probably people who are the contacts at those companies. And we want only those people who are in Kansas City. So you'll see down here on the criteria, it's Kansas City. Now notice I have that suppressed. You say, why did you do that? Well, let's go up and take a look. I don't want to keep looking at Kansas City, Kansas City, Kansas City. In fact, I called my query Kansas City clients, so it ought to be pretty obvious what I'm looking at. So I just go ahead and suppress this. It doesn't change the data. It just keeps me from having all this duplicate stuff out there. Now, there were some tasks that we had to do with this case. And let's look at task 5. And we were asked to run a query. And I would bet you that what they were after, and I can just look at this, is who ordered, what was the last time somebody ordered something from us? And I want the name of that company, where they're at, and the first and last name of the person who serves as the contact person. Okay, simple enough. And I could see that up here in the results set, but I can also go down here in the graphic user interface and see it. There's all the different fields. And so I'm getting the company, the city, the first name, last name, the last order date. Now, if I want to, on order date, I could put it in some kind of order, and I'm going to put it in descending order. Why? Because I'll start with the last time someone ordered from me for sure, and I'm going to run this. Okay. Well, this is most recent, so we'll go back, and I want the less recent, so the ascending date, and we'll go back up here to the view. Okay. So I've got anybody, so I have everything in order here. Now, by default, the database will put it into ascending order, but I've got it here. All right. Now, if I'm interested in anybody who ordered only in 2008, on the we've got ascending, and I'm going to try something here. But for the criterion, I'm going to put between 01, 01, I'm going to call just the orders for 2008. I can move that over. And this will be 12/31/2008. And this should give me everybody who ordered in 2008. Let's see what it does. And there it does. I just adapted this a little bit by creating a criteria. Okay. So when we went through the gardens, it pretty much got things rolling for us. Now here is a form that we use for to populate our table. And we have the company number, all this information. Now, on a form, one of the nice things is I can do a search typically. And so it's all right. Someone calls me, I'm from French's, okay? And I'm just interested in talking about my orders. And I'll click OK. And it's going to find me every one of them in French's. All right. I can also navigate through this form. I can go record to record or the last record. I can input a new record. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back up to the text. Now, I've really covered almost everything in chapter 1. Okay. And all this business about identifying, if you skip that stuff, understanding data concepts, base concepts, that's what you want to see. You want to read this. Okay. Forget about the enabling macro, just how a table's put together. We've covered some of that. And then exporting tables, you can mess around with that. Read that, take a look at queries and reports. All right. And we'll go back over here to the files section. I'm going to go to the modules. And for access case number 1, down here, I'm going to upload access case number 1. And so I'm going to add that Northampton case. And let's see, there it is, the ACDB1. I'm going to add that item. Okay. And I'm going to scoot it up here. Okay. And so you can upload that for credit, or you could do the garden. I don't care. Then for access case number 2, all right, I'm going to diminish this off for a second, and I'm going to go back to these resources for the access cases. Let's open that up. In access case number 2, they want us to create a personnel database, and we're going to create some tables, use selected queries, report design, and we'll be working with Garden 06, and that's from chapter 6. Now, the file ACDB2 key, that's in the welcome module in Canvas. It's not in the files, it's in the welcome module. Okay? And so we're going to take a look at it as well. I'll go back up here. And I think probably what we'll do, let's see, we've got the 15th, so we've got next week. I think what we'll do next week is we'll take a look at access case number 1. Let me move these around here. Oh no, this is fine. So you can use this or the garden case. And so I think next Saturday, next week, we'll cover access case number 2 and 3. Let me see here for a moment. Yeah. And if you want to do some work ahead, so you can be really on top of what's going on when I do we have class next week, next Thursday. These are the tasks and the business problems that we're going to deal with. Here's Hudson Palmer. That's ACCDB2 key. That's the welcome module. And we'll also work with Garden 06, which is the file out of chapter 6, okay? And we'll be able to move just a hair faster than we have today. All righty. I think I'm going to stop now. And I think we've gone, I've probably got an hour or so. So we're honing in on that magic 150 minutes. And we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to stop the share. And I want to stop the recording. I'm going to make this full because I can't see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to stop the recording.